is Dr. Stan. Bob is just talking about the situation over there in Europe, saying, the bankers who really don't have any money invested in the loans they've made, they simply create the money out of nothing through this fractional reserve banking system. Some of the banks are leveraged 20 to 1. They lend $20 for every dollar they have, and they pay an interest rate of 1%, and they charge an interest rate of 5 or 6%. That's pretty good. Some of them are leveraged 20 to 1, 30 to 1, 40 to 1, 50 to 1. Some of them even 70 to 1. They lend $70 for every dollar they have. That, of course, is not sound banking process. That's simply organized thievery. And Bob is saying that it looks very much like Greece is going to say, we're just not going to pay you back. Now, the whole banking system is built upon confidence. The promise to pay, you pay your debts, and then the whole thing goes. What happens when people start to default? Why, the whole financial system comes down. And the one thing that the D word is the thing that they always worry about. Then they always mention that in hushed tones. Default. Well, of course, if certainly Greece were to default and some of the other countries were to default, then the whole banking system in Europe would come down, and then it would begin to collapse here as well. Is that accurate, Bob?
That is very accurate. They've had demonstrations throughout Greece and Crete and in the islands, as well as Thessalonica and Athens and Piraeus. And that's 150,000 people a day. Now, on Wednesday, one Sunday, they turned out 2 million. On this Wednesday, they're going to have not only massive demonstrations, peaceful. There's been no problems. They're going to surround the House of Representatives with tractors and trucks and things like that, buses, and they're not going to let the manor out. And it's a confrontation. And the president, Judge Pompidou, who's a Marxist, he says he's going to get this resolution passed to accept what the bankers have offered. And the public says, no, we're not going to do that. And he doesn't have the votes to do it either. And if he has a referendum, he'll lose 75 to 25 percent. And so this thing in Greece is going to blow up sooner or later. And even if they give them good rates and change the rules, which they should, to help them not to go into bankruptcy and default, then in a year from now, the problem is going to be back again. They've already taken 40% cuts in wages. Retirement's gone from 50 years old to 70 years old. And massive cutbacks. I mean, you only can do so much in a short period of time. I mean, these people are not, I don't know, geniuses? None of us are. And so they've done the best they can. And people don't like that. And, of course, they weren't paying attention like Americans are, and that's what happens.
Well, because here in America, because they keep talking about raising the retirement age from 65 to 67, and of course everybody's yelling and screaming how terrible this is, and they're talking about having to cut back on the Social Security, and everybody's saying, well, we paid it and we're entitled to it, and they're talking about cutting back on Medicare, which is, of course, kind of bankrupt. I mean, we're putting out $750 billion a year on Medicare, Medicaid. Almost a quarter of the entire expenditures of the country is on going into this, into Medicare, Medicaid, and basically, everybody says, well, oh my goodness, you can't take away what these people are entitled to. In a free society, you aren't entitled to anything. That's why the founding fathers didn't want the government to be able to provide for the people, because they knew they would vote themselves into slavery. And that's just what we've done. And so What they're going to do is just come in, and one way or the other, they're going to have to make their cuts. And of course, what they're going to do is start letting people die. We did not have a problem. Back in 1965, healthcare spending was 2.6% of the expenditures of this country, national expenditures. Today, it's 26% of the expenditures. 20% of that by the federal government, about 6% from the general population. For the rest of it, it's Medicare, Medicaid that's destroying this nation, and there's no problem facing medicine today that a new government program won't make worse. And the socialists know that. They want to wreck our system because they want a new system, a total socialist system that would be, as Winston had described to O'Brien O'Brien described to Winston in the prophetic book 1984, like a boot stamping on a human face forever. That's what they want. Well, go right ahead, Bob.
Well, I think you adequately outlined the problem of American deficits in spending. It'll all be solved. All we have to do is stop this unreasonable military spending. I mean, they're giving these so-called rebels, which are all CIA employees, in Libya another $5 billion. And now there's a investigation going on by the federal government as to the $100 billion that Libya had in sovereign, they had a sovereign fund of money which they invested in things. And I think the court knows that they looted the thing. That's Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and all their pals. And I think that, in part, was probably one of the reasons for the invasion. They figured they'd cover it up, and it isn't happening. And it's $100 billion, and how much they looted, I don't know. And so you've got all of these problems, as you pointed out, going on in the Middle East. In the United States, we still haven't seen the real fallout in the municipalities and the states. I mean, we're talking probably 5 million layoffs in total over like a 3-year period. From here on out, never mind what they've already done. That's a lot of people. And that means unemployment cannot, no matter what they did, go down. And so unemployment probably next year, which is 22.5%, 22.4% right now, it'll probably climb up to 30%. There's nothing they can do to stop it. And they really don't care. And I see Larry Summers today talking about, you got to give us that QE3, because if we don't, the whole bottom's going to fall out, and blah, blah, blah. And, of course, it's just an extension to buy time to set up their next war. So I think that's what's going to happen. They're going to have a QE3 of some kind, and they'll inflate everything. And instead of inflation ending at 25 to 30% next year, it'll go on to the following year to 50% hyperinflation.
Well, that will certainly be great for gold and silver, but that will devastate the life savings of all the older people, and certainly impoverish both the old and the young. I mean, inflation is the cruelest tax of all.
Well, there's no question. It's like a thief in the night.
Right, and of course Bob has been saying over and over again there would be a quantitative easing 3. This is simply a fancy term. They use these terms because they know nobody understands what they're talking about. That means just simply massive deficit spending to try to stimulate the economy. Well, you can see what a great job they did with quantitative easing 1, and then quantitative easing 2. Certainly our unemployment rates is up to about 22%, and that's the real unemployment, not the one that they're talking about. The gross domestic product is falling, and the real gross domestic product, according to Sydney, Oh, John Williams is what, about minus 1.5, 1.2, somewhere in there?
That's correct. But the money supply and credit continue to increase. They use swaps. They are creating money out of thin air to buy treasuries and agencies and toxic waste. And it goes on and on and on.
Well, now, how much of that money the Federal Reserve is using are the bank deposits? You know, the Federal Reserve is just paying the banks to deposit their money with the Fed. It looks to me like the Fed is using the money from the bankers to buy up the valueless bonds. Is that where the money's coming from? Because the money supply isn't increasing. So where's the Fed getting all the money to buy it? Isn't that the bank's money?
Well, in part, yes. And they make about 2.5% net on it without any risk. And sooner or later, that money is going to end up being monetized into the system and used. And once that happens, you've got even more inflation. As I said earlier, QE2 next year will bring us 25 to 30% inflation. And then the following year, if we have this QE3 or the equivalent, we're looking at 50%. And that's the way it's going to be. And that's what they're asking for.
Our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY. 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 464-8295. You're going to have to understand what's really going on, ladies and gentlemen. They're intentionally and purposely destroying the value of our currency. These are very smart people. They know what they're doing. They just don't want the American people to know what they're doing. So, again, our number, 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. If you have a question for Bob Chapman, the International Forecaster, these are the most dangerous financial times of your life. Most people are not going to survive. This is Dr. Stan. We have Jim calling from West Virginia. A question for our guest, Bob Chapman. Jim, what's the next question?
Well, besides the fact that we have an 8% shrink rate, people ought to know that instead of growth by the time you correct for inflation. I can run a calculator, and I've been told that this world costs between $3 and $4 trillion. And we've killed, murdered, whatever you want to call it, 1.5 to 2 million people over there. So each corpse is costing us around $2 million, while people in America are starving to death. And these people are paying with their life to satisfy the bloodlust. Do you think that we can tell enough people that we're paying $2 million per corpse? And I think I've said enough.
I think we can, but people got to listen. And they got to tune into this program and others like it, read The Forecaster and other publications like it that point these things up. And if that happens, they'll be well aware of what's going on.
Okay, well, let's go to James, who's calling us from South Carolina. And again, let's see. Again, of course, our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 464-8295. Hi, James. How are we doing?
Doing well.
Do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I keep hearing about new technologies, and recently there's some excitement about a man in Italy that's going to market some cold fusion device. And I have heard in the past, Gerald Salente and other people say that if we have new innovations to go into the economy, that this will offset a lot of this stuff that's going on. Do you agree with that, or what is your take on all that? And do you think the cold fusion thing is real?
The cold fission?
Yeah, thing in Italy.
I think that cold fission's been available for a long time. And I don't think they wanted to have it because it'll supersede the power of the oil companies. And they don't want that. And new innovations certainly help. But it's hard for them to help when you have a deliberate program of destroying the United States. So they have no intention of allowing anything good to happen that will help. There's not going to be a bailout through technology or anything else. These people behind the scenes want to take it down, and they're doing their best to do it.
Okay, how does that answer your question, James?
Regrettably, it does.
Okay, thanks. Okay, let's go. Rich, who's calling us from Aromas, California, and our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. Hi, Rich. How you doing?
Hi, Grandpa Liberty. How are you? My friend Tony Watson called me and said, you got to get on there. Grandpa Liberty's on with Bob Chapman, and these are my two favorite people in the world.
All right, fine. Well, it's good to have you with us. But what can we do for you?
Okay, number one, I have two questions. Number one, I've got about $130,000 I paid into Social Security. They forced me to pay into it, and I had to pay into it. And I heard you guys talking earlier about that could be all lost. If they were not to give me my Social Security, do I sue the federal government, or what do you do to get your money back that you paid into it?
All right, that's a good question. You might ask, what do you do when, of course, you've been doing business with Bernie Madoff, and he suddenly announces it's a Ponzi scheme and there is no money? What do you do? So what should Rich be doing now? The federal government says that they've got his money, but of course there is no pension fund. It's all been spent. It's a Ponzi scheme. What can Rich do? As they've cheated him, they've stolen his money. What can he do?
They stole from my family.
First of all, you cannot sue the federal government unless they allow you to. And so they won't allow you to. So you have no recourse. Since the first monies flowed in June of 1934, FDR's and all his successors have stepped in and stolen every cent of it. You might say diverted. But, the money was paid in, and they treated it as a tax. And so, as far as they're concerned, you have no recourse.
Basically, the Supreme Court has found that this is not an insurance policy. It's a welfare system, and they can change the rules anytime they want. That's unfortunately the way it really works, Rich. They've simply cheated you, and they've taken advantage of the American people, and the people who actually used up the money, they retired, they got their pension fund, and there's nobody to sue. The only thing you can do is get mad and help us, of course, to expose this whole Ponzi scheme. It's all a Ponzi scheme. In a free society, you don't have Ponzi schemes.
Right.
That's what socialism is all about. Hang on there. We'll be back in just a moment. Hang on.
Thank you.
The GC
9 at 3473.
Well, okay, fine. Thanks very much. That was Rich from Aromas asking about silver, and Bob says we're going to find out if the $32 level will hold in the next couple of days. Let's go to Craig, who's calling from Salinas. But before we get to Craig from Salinas, let me tell you, if you'd like to talk to Bob, the number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 464-8295. But before we get to Craig, Bob, I want you to tell our listeners how they can get to the Forecaster, why they should buy the Forecaster, and put a plug in for the Forecaster.
Plug the Forecaster. That's it. Well, the Forecaster is about business, finance, economic, social, and political issues throughout the world. We publish by email on Wednesday and Saturday. Have a hard copy that goes out twice a month for those who are not on the Internet. And everything that you need to know each week is in that publication. Get a free introductory copy by going to theinternationalforecaster.com. theinternationalforecaster.com, or to www.intforecaster.com. That's intforecaster.com. And for those of you who would like to ask a question, we answer everyone. And for those of you who want copies, and for those of you who want a copy of our recent releases for gold and silver shares, email Bob, B-O-B, at intforecaster.com. That's Bob at intforecaster.com. And for those of you who would like to call toll-free, that number is 800-375-4188. That's 800-375-4188.
All right, well then let's go to Craig, who's calling from Salinas. Hi, Craig. Do you have a question or comment?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Frank.
Right, go ahead, Craig.
I've heard some economists talking about that we're heading for a disaster by printing money and wild inflation, but they said there's another choice, and that is to devalue the dollar. And if the government somehow chose that choice, how would that work? How would that affect the average person with some stocks, some bonds, some gold, some silver? What would happen? How would that proceed?
All right.
Devaluing.
All right. I think
it all depends on the ratio.
All right. Go ahead.
I'm looking for 2/3 reduction. That means every dollar would be worth $33.50.
Every dollar, every $100 would be worth
$100 would be worth $33.50. So you lose 2/3 of your money, and at the same time, there would have to be a default, and they own trillions and trillions of dollars. What I think they'll have is a meeting. All the currencies would be revalued and devalued against one another, and it would be multilateral default. Once it was settled, then they would decide, are we going to use an SDR for the new reserve currency, which I don't think will work? Will we use a group of currencies, 5 or 10 of them? Maybe. And will we use the dollar if they back it with gold? And that's a possibility as well. But this, I've been saying this for like 3 years, this is where this is headed. It's the only way that they can make the system work, and that's what they're going to do.
Okay, I hope that answered. But Craig, what this will mean to you is you will lose 2/3 of whatever you've worked for, everything you've saved, unless you're in gold and silver. That will hold its value. It will go up, but it won't be any more valuable. It'll just go up because the dollar is falling. Inflation is the cruelest tax of all, and that is exactly what they intend to do. And they're going to say, but it wasn't our fault, it just happened. And these people should be arrested and tried for treason because they're subversives. They know what they're doing, and they're simply stealing the wealth of the American people and generations yet unborn. Anything else, Craig, before we let you go?
Would it be a good idea to have some foreign currency you can buy currency shares ETF?
All right, fine. What do you think about foreign currencies, Bob?
Absolutely not. That time is past. Besides, you have every nation rigging their currencies. And in the last 11 years, the 9 major currencies of the world, each year, have fallen in value over 20% versus gold and silver every year. Now, why would anybody in their right mind want to have a currency rather than gold and silver coin, bullion, or shares, or a combination thereof?
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, just one more little bit of a question. I have some gold stocks in foreign countries, and what would happen to them?
They'd go up in value. Because they produce gold and silver, and if they produce gold and silver, that means that they're going to make more money on what they produce because the price of gold and silver will go up if the value of the dollar and other currencies continue to go down.
But Craig, then the government will come in. They'll tax, your profit. They say, well, you made a profit, and so we're going to tax you on it, even though you didn't make any profit at all. You're still losing money because the value of the money is going down. But your foreign stocks will go up in value as long as they're gold and silver. Thanks very much for calling.
Thank you very much.
Let's go to Jimmy calling from Florida. Again, our number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY. 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, you do not invest in gold and silver to make money. You invest there to actually preserve the value of your wealth. Now, if you make money, that's all well and good. But the major thing is to preserve some wealth. Would you agree, Bob?
Absolutely.
All right.
And you have no other choice. That's the only place to go to, and remember that.
Our telephone number, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. Jimmy's calling from Florida. Jimmy, do you have a question?
Yeah, I got a couple of 3 questions for Bob. I'd like to know when he thinks they're going to cut Social Security. And number 2...
All right, well, let's take them one at a time. When do you think they're going to cut Social Security, Bob?
I have no idea.
And I don't think they're going to cut it, Jimmy. I think they're just going to destroy it by inflation. They're not going to cut your Social Security payment. They're just going to lower the value of the dollar so you get less value, but you'll still get the same amount of money. After all, if they cut your Social Security, you'd be mad. As long as you get the same amount of money, even if it doesn't buy as much, why, they can always blame it on somebody else. Anything else, Jimmy?
They started that already.
Every time you turn on TV, these people in Congress that talk about cutting Social Security, they don't ever say anything about cutting out money for all these needless wars.
Of course not. Okay, anything else, Jimmy?
No, that's
Number
it
2.
for right now, I guess.
What's that?
I guess that does it for right now.
God bless, and thanks very much, Jimmy. Let's go to George calling from Toronto, and we've got a couple of Georges up in Toronto, but it's always good to speak to whichever George this is. Hi, George. How you doing?
I'm fine, Dr. Stan. My question for Bob is this. Bob, will the junior mining stocks in the future have a hard time raising money by getting money from the banks if the banks are having problems?
Well, they're not having problems getting money now, and they haven't for the last several years. So I don't think they're going to have trouble. If they've got gold and silver in the ground, and they can bring it in on a cost basis of, let's say, $800 an ounce, and let's say that their overhead runs another 30%. So let's say they can bring it in at $1,200 an ounce in a very expensive mining operation. Today, they still have $300 an ounce profit net. And so people are going to be interested in that. Major producers right now are selling at 7 or 8 times earnings, and they're all thinking of raising their dividends as well as instituting dividends. So this is the way they want to fight the government, by making their stocks more valuable.
Okay, anything else, George?
Oh, that's all. Thanks, guys.
Okay, let's go to call Mark, who's calling us from Oregon. And hi, Mark. How are you doing?
Hello again, Dr. Stan. Hello, Bob. Great to hear both of you gentlemen as usual. Bob, you had mentioned, several options that they seem to have, and that you feel that it's going to come down to one of these options, such as a basket of currencies. It won't be the SDR. And there were 1 or 2 other ways, the gold-backed dollar as a world reserve currency, heading up a basket of currencies, maybe the third option. But I've heard others speak of the biometric aspect of digital money, and basically toward the idea of a cashless society. Do you see that as a possible option, where they'll just go to a cashless system? And, of course, we know on the spiritual level that could very well be the immediate precursor to the mark of the beast.
The conversation has been going on about digital money since 1965.
Mm-hmm.
And today, the possibilities are there, ever more than before. But the public is not going to accept digital money when they just have seen the currencies of the world continue to devalue versus gold and silver, because they're fiat. They have nothing backing them. And so if you come up with a digital currency, people are going to say, I don't want it. There's nothing behind it. You're going to do the same thing you did before. So you either put gold behind it or we don't want it.
Is that a practical thing as far as preventing it? Is just our desire not to have it?
Right. I think it is, because we're going to run into a situation where you've seen what you've seen in the inflation increase, the increase in money and credit, and all the other things that we've seen financially and economically. It's going to get worse. Desperate people do desperate things. I mean, Larry Summers is on the television and radio today saying, you got to give us some money. If you don't, the whole thing's going down the chute. And he's right. The question is, do you give them the money? Because all you're doing is buying